Welcome to Lunch with the Lord. I'm Pastor Mark. We're in Joshua, and we're going to be starting in chapter 10 this lesson. But before we begin, our theme verse for Lunch with the Lord is Jeremiah 15:16. Thy words were found, and I did eat them, and thy word was unto me the joy and the rejoicing of my heart. Now, in chapter 10, we will see the defeat of the kings and the taking of their land in the south. All right. In verses 1 through 27 of this chapter, we see the defeat of the 5 kings. Now, reports reach Jerusalem of Israel's defeat of Jericho and Ai, and they also get word that Gibeon has made a peace treaty with Israel. The Israelites now have a large portion of land in the middle of the country. They also possess the main roads that go from north to south, which will affect travel and trade. Out of fear, the king of Jerusalem calls 4 more kings with their armies to go to Gibeon in order to punish the Gibeonites for making a treaty with Israel and to stop Israel from taking any more cities and lands in Canaan, and at least in the south. At least in the south part. They don't want them coming down into the south, taking any cities and any land. So they're coming together to try to defeat Israel. Now, let's read verses 1 through 3, and it says, Now it came to pass when Adonizedek, king of Jerusalem, had heard how Joshua had taken Ai and had utterly destroyed it, as he had done to Jericho and her king, so he had done to Ai and her king. And now the inhabitants of Gibeon had made peace with Israel and were among them, that they what? They feared greatly, because Gibeon was a great city, as one of the royal cities, and because it was greater than Ai, and all the men thereof feared mightily. Now, Adonizedek was the king of Jerusalem, and his name means Lord of Righteousness. And there was another king of Jerusalem with a similar name, which is Melchizedek. You have Adonizedek, Lord of Righteousness, and Melchizedek, which means King of Righteousness. Now, Melchizedek was the king of Salem, which later was Jerusalem. But he was the king of Salem during Abraham's time, and we see that in Genesis 14, verse 18. By God having the Israelites take Jericho and Ai, and now they make a peace treaty with the Gibeonites, the land was now cut straight in half. Adonizedek could not call on the kings of the north for help. The south had to fend for itself. As I said, it was because of fear that Adonizedek reacted the way he did. It says in verse 3, and they feared greatly because Gibeon was a great city. I believe that the very first emotion that Satan felt after being cast out of heaven was fear. I think fear is the most dominant negative emotion in Satan and in his demons and in sinful people. I think everything that a person does outside of God or outside of his word is motivated and can be traced back to fear. What I'm saying is I believe every sin that we commit is motivated by fear. If you follow it all the way back in progression in your heart, in your mind, you'll find that fear was the root. Wars, fightings, divorce, pride, resentment, envy, judging others. Listen, if you trace these sins back to their origin, you will find that they all began with a fear of something. They feared something, stealing, lying, whatever it was. It's all, you trace it back, and you'll find that fear was the basis for that sin. In our context, Adonizedek not only fears his position as king and the loss of his kingdom, but he fears the loss of his own existence, his own life. As Satan lost his position in heaven and any opportunity to exalt himself over God, so also people fear that they will lose something. Therefore, they react because of the fear that is in them. Whether it is loss of friendship or loss of a house or a marriage or loss of a marriage or a job or a position in the church, money or health, whatever it is, fear is the foundation of why people react the way they do. Again, I fully believe fear is the basis for every negative thing that we do. Verses 4 and 5, and it says here, come up unto me and help me, that we may smite Gibeon, for it has made peace with Joshua and with the children of Israel. Therefore the 5 kings of the Amorites, the king of Jerusalem, the king of Hebron, the king of Jarmuth, the king of Lachish, and the king of Eglon, gathered themselves together, and they went up, they and all their hosts, and they encamped before Gibeon, and made war against it. Now, the Gibeonites were hated because of making this peace treaty with Joshua and the children of Israel. Adonizedek is named Lord of Righteousness, and he who rules in Jerusalem, which means peace. So you have Adonizedek reigns in Jerusalem, meaning the Lord of Righteousness reigns in peace. Yet this supposed righteous man gave no peace to the Gibeonites. We see that Adonizedek is not worthy of his name. Just because he may be a descendant of Melchizedek does not mean that the character of Melchizedek is passed down to Adonizedek. Character is not hereditary. Children of the righteous may be very sinful. You may know good Christian parents who have children, and their children are way out there. They're not like their parents. They want nothing to do with God, nothing to do with church, nothing. In fact, they may even be against it. So character is not passed down. Adonizedek's hatred was a very real thing. It was out of fear of great loss and hatred against the Gibeonites that he sent messengers to these other 4 cities. But why should he be angry? Listen, why should he be angry with a people who used to be his friends? Didn't the Gibeonites have a right to make their own minds up, especially when it meant their own existence, when it meant their own lives? Shouldn't the Gibeonites be able to do whatever they want to do? When the Gibeonites humbled themselves and surrendered to the children of Israel, then the hatred of man was revealed. But there was no real reason for the hatred of the 5 kings except because of having a rebellious heart. Why didn't they let the Gibeonites just do whatever they wanted to do? They didn't, because of the hate, the rebellion within their own heart caused them to hate the Gibeonites and to go up against them. The Gibeonites set an example to all the other kings in Canaan, that if they would humble themselves to the God of the Israelites, they would live. This would take great wisdom and humility. But their continued hatred and war against the Gibeonites was ultimately open rebellion against God. That's what it was. It was open rebellion against God. By them hating the Gibeonites, they were actually hating God, Israel and Israel's God. That's what it was. All of this is a picture of how the world hates those who humble themselves and come to Christ. If you're a Christian, you've given your heart to Christ, the world hates you. Why? Because you humbled yourself to Christ. And they don't want to. The unsaved world doesn't want to humble themselves and be obedient to God. They don't want God telling them what to do. Jesus said, if the world hate you, you know that it hated me first. The unsaved will always fight against submitting to the cross and submitting to Christ. The unsaved person they'll always want to fight for their independence and their out of rebellion, because they want to be it goes all the way back to Adam and Eve. You can make your own. Satan tempted them. You can make your own decisions. You can be your own God. And that's what people today, 6,000 years later, people today want to be their own God. They want to make their own decisions. They don't want God telling them anything. And when a person's heart is touched by God and they humble themselves to the cross and to Christ, the world hates it, because they don't want a living example around them telling them that they also, in their heart, they need to do the same thing. And they don't want to, and they fight against it. All right, we're going to continue on in verses 6 and 7 next lesson. But until then, walk with the Lord. I know he walks with you.